Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Waffle Press Retrospective. I'm your host, Diego Crespo. With me today is my co-hosts.
Matt Garingo, which is me.
Yes, it is. I just wanted to leave you hanging there for a second. I didn't know. I wanted to
All
change it
right.
up because I feel like the show is starting to change it up. And the show we're here to talk about is Avatar: The Last Airbender. And this is the Legend of the Last Retrospective, a podcast series about Avatar, the film adaptation by M. Night Shyamalan, and Legend of Korra. And every podcast recording, we go over 5 episodes of The Last Airbender. Eventually, that will change when we get to Legend of Korra because that show is structured differently. But today's episodes...
Thanks for setting that all up.
You're welcome. I'm trying to do more in-depth introductions for these because we played it fast and loose before.
We're recording this on August 6th.
No, you don't have to do that.
It is currently 3:24 on the East Coast, which means it's like noon where Diego's at.
It is.
Partly cloudy.
It's sunny here, but it's a nice 79 degrees, which is a great change of pace because it's been over 100 for the last 3 weeks, which is not great.
I keep losing power here. The clock next to me is still wrong. I have not fixed it.
Anyways, the episodes we're here to talk about today are The Blind Bandit, Zuko Alone, The Chase, Bitterwork, and The Library.
I also have, there's a lamp next to me it's the leg lamp from Christmas Story. But like a mini one. Because I think they sold that with like a collector's edition of A Christmas Story. Remember Christmas Story?
I do remember that.
You'll shoot your eye out, kid.
You want to know a hot take about that movie?
It's not that great.
Yeah.
I like it.
You know what? I never got into it as a kid. I always thought it was way too mean.
It's pretty mean, but I like that.
Maybe I need to rewatch it because I have not seen it in forever.
I just like when Santa puts the boot in his face. That's pretty, that
is pretty great. But also
the Blind Bandit.
It's a great episode. It is also the introduction of fan favorite character Toph, who on some days is my favorite character in the series. I love Toph, and Toph is great. And
well, you fucked up what I was gonna do a joke.
Oh, what are you gonna say?
I'm gonna say this episode is the introduction of my favorite character in the whole series, the Boulder.
I'll put it first.
It's like, everyone thinks I'm gonna say Toph, but I say the Boulder. Did you get it?
Yeah, I got it.
Did you get it?
Well, I'm gonna change this conversation in a landslide.
It's the Boulder, right?
Is it?
Who's the guy? Who's voicing the Boulder? Hold on.
Oh my god.
I'm looking it up.
Why is this such a disaster?
This is going good.
This is really bad.
This is going great. I'm feeling good about it.
I'm going to say right now, this is like the strongest series of episodes to date, I think. Like back to back to back, like nonstop, knocking it out of the park quality for these episodes. And I don't know why this is such a difficult conversation to have.
Mick Foley was the voice of the Boulder.
Okay.
And he's doing an impression of The Rock.
That's pretty funny.
So did you get that one?
Yeah, I did. The Rock was a wrestler. Now he's in franchises.
Yeah. Now he's one of the most bankable movie stars of all time. Because of those fucking Jumanji movies.
Yeah, that's like insane how much those have made. And I like those. But like, wow. People really like those.
Those movies should not be 2 hours long.
They're a little long. But whatever.
They're
I like them. I got a soft spot for them.
Sure. It's a game. Sucked into the game. Kids can't do board games today, though. It's gotta be a video game. But it's also gotta be retro.
Speaking of
Cinema's
games,
dead.
speaking of games, Also in this episode, we get an introduction into like how bending can be used for games and entertainment value with an underground fighting ring, for kids.
Yeah, well, it's literally like it's just pro wrestling. Like the Rock thing is very apt.
Mm-hmm.
Because they literally bring out the guy who's supposed to be like the Fire Lord fighter,
The Fire Nation fighter. Man.
Yeah, and he's basically the Iron Sheik. Like, can you believe that? It's like, I don't know if wrestling is still that way, but where it was literally like, let's just get all these racial stereotypes and just have American guys beat the shit out of them. Like, for 2 decades.
Well, because America's got to win.
Yeah, we're doing a lot of winning lately.
Fucking.
I've told you my theory on Vince McMahon, right?
I'm going to say yes just to move the conversation along.
All right, so my thing is that when the XFL was first started, which I think The Rock just purchased the XFL.
Yeah, he's like one of the new major shareholders, if not the major shareholder.
Because it was actually, from what I understand, it was actually going pretty good this time, but then COVID hit and, like, fucked everything up.
Fucking hell.
And so Vince McMahon, like, cut his losses. He made a ton of money, and everyone he employed lost money, which is what happens with that asshole. But I believe NBC picked up the XFL at first, and then it lasted 1 season and got canceled. And then in that vacuum, they had to fill it with reality shows, and one of those shows was The Apprentice with Donald Trump. So I think there's an alternate universe where the XFL succeeded, and Vince McMahon is president right now.
Holy fuck. Is that a better or worse timeline?
No, it's like exactly the same. It's just Vince McMahon's president. The problem is it would be like, either like The Rock would be canceled because he would come out and support Vince McMahon, or The Rock would be one of those guys who was like, I work for Vince McMahon, I know him, he's a fucking asshole. So you'd have like either liberals embracing The Rock or conservatives embracing The Rock. It would be something like that where like all our favorite wrestlers would either be heroes or canceled. As opposed to pretty much, I think everyone except like Trace Adkins and Meatloaf, who competed on Celebrity Apprentice, have all like said Donald Trump was like the worst guy ever. So
that's just a liberal agenda.
Yeah, man. All those classic liberals like Penn Jillette and several other country music stars. I don't know, man. This whole country's lost its mind.
Well, what did you think about this episode?
No, this episode's great. Well, it's weird. This is where the show gets really interesting because stuff starts happening in a lot of these where I'm like, in my mind, I remember them being like 5 different episodes. But it's actually all of it happens in one episode. And that was surprising to me, like in my mind, because they start really packing in the story. And that's not like a complaint. Like, I don't think they rush any of it. I think it all flows very well, because this is one where like the introduction of Toph and like the boulder and all that shit, I remember. I didn't remember the reveal of her rich family being this early. I thought that came later. I also remember the shitty earthbending teacher. I thought that was a different episode too.
Yeah, there's more going on in these than compared to where they were in the first season, especially. Like, those were definitely a little slimmer, and I think I even talked about it. I definitely talked about it off mic with you, where like I didn't mind doing the 5-episode stretches for the first season, and I was a little hesitant to do them for later seasons. But I think we got a pretty good rhythm of recording like this, so I don't mind. But there is just like, there's so many little details packed in that you could kind of fall down a rabbit hole of any of these episodes.
Like, the majority of these, I think we could do an hour on every one of these episodes that we're talking about today. And it's interesting you say the flow has been going pretty good, even though you just said this is maybe the most disastrous episode so far.
Well, yeah, but like just the opening.
It's my job to try and sabotage everything.
Why is that your job?
Because I bring it back around. I get us thinking about it from a different angle. What are we just going to be like every other fucking show talks about? Is be like, oh, the characters are so great. Blah, blah, blah. No other show you're going to hear about how Vince McMahon is president in alternate reality. That's how we get these people to listen. The 6 people.
I'm so tired all the time now.
Well, this might bring in new people because the Avatar fan base is pretty strong.
I know. I'm so happy. Except for
there's
holdouts. There's holdouts of people on the timeline that I know of, Gene, that haven't started the show yet.
Gene, what are you doing?
I know. What the...
Gene, I'm not even, like, angry at him. It's just, like, you're depriving yourself of a great show.
Right? Like, that's really the thing. Like, I'm making fun of it, but also, like, just... You'll be so happy when you start watching it.
Well, it's, like... It's one of those things where, like, I go back to so much that, like, mattered to me as a kid. And I'll be like, I can understand why I wouldn't be into this now. Like, I can still get something from it, but it's either aged poorly or I'm just a different person than when I watched it, or, like, any number of things. But this is a show where it's like, I'm thoroughly enjoying this rewatch. And it's mostly aged pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's been, like, only a few hiccups here and there, in my opinion. And it's even more shocking when it feels like, when you realize it was made like 2005, 2006, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's what's always kind of shocking to me. And I just don't, like, this is something I would still recommend to people. Whereas, like, half a dozen things I loved from that same time, I'd be like, you kind of had to be there for it. Or, like, has been thoroughly canceled by the creator revealing themselves to be an awful transphobe. Stares.
I wonder who you're talking about.
Yeah, you know, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, even Star Wars, which I love to death, it's like, if you tried, like, I would say give Star Wars a try. If you don't like it, that's fine. I understand not getting into it, especially as an adult. But this, I think, if you like these type of stories, if you like fantasy stories, you could do a whole lot worse.
Yeah, literally, I would say like 99% of the other fantasy stories out there I would consider worse. And not even bad. Like, there's obviously bad stuff out there, but that's not even what I'm referring to. I'm just saying this is like the cream of the crop kind of situation. And speaking of people getting into it, I just want to highlight, I had an astronomy teacher in college, and he would always go on tangents about, like, yeah, my son and daughter showed me Avatar. Have you guys seen that? It's so good, right? Like, and
that's great.
Yeah, and he, through the whole semester, he would update us on where he was, and he finished it before we were finished with finals, and he was like, oh my god. It was great. That was a great class.
That's great. But, like, yeah, I would say, like, I don't know if I would say it's better than a lot of other fantasy fiction out there, but I think it's, like, the most accessible, if that makes sense, while also not being, like, dumbed down in any way, while also still being a show for children.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I've been rereading the Book of the Long Sun series. I mean, Book of the New Sun series. There's, like, multiple books. Have you ever read any of those?
No, I have not. I need to read more fantasy right now.
Yeah. The Book of the New Sun stuff is, like, really dense, and there's, like, a lot of layers to it, and you almost, like, I could not get into it until I literally had to buy a fan-made dictionary of terms that are used in the books.
What?
Yeah, and it's worth it because there's a logic to it, but I kind of needed that for help. And it helped me get through it. And it's one of those things where it's like, it's really dense, it's really creative, it's fascinating, and, like, opens up a lot of questions, but it was written in, like, 1980. It was written by a dude, and as great and deep and as interesting as they are, there's still, like, a lot of weird stuff about women in it. like not like overtly. It's like one of those things where it's not that like overt sexism of like women belong in their place or something like that, but just like a guy who's clearly spent a lot of time thinking about women in his private time.
Yeah.
Is I guess what I'll say.
Is it more like like of the era sexism? Or it's kind of like the norm, unfortunately.
Well, I would say of the era, but I think in science fiction fantasy that era kind of lingered on fairly long. I would say that era lingered on until like the early 2000s, at least. And like even now, like you still will find it in books. And it's one of those things where it's like I love those books, but it's also something where I would be hesitant to recommend it to some people because of those elements. Whereas I don't, like, even as like we've discussed some episodes, we felt like maybe dropped the ball on certain things. I still feel like I could recommend this to almost anyone.
That's an excellent point. I don't know. I don't have anything to build off of that. I just like that the show is accessible like that. Yeah, I like the way you put that. It's the most accessible of these. Like even Lord of the Rings, which I like, is like peak film fantasy for me. It is very dense still.
Yeah. It's that thing where it's like, in my opinion, it's like the director's cuts of all of those movies are better, but then like Return of the King is almost 5 hours.
It's I think it's 4, which is still like wow, a lot.
It's still like super long. It's like nuts, and it's like hard to recommend that to someone, especially when it's like so much of it is about just wandering around and observing things. And then it's one of those things where it's like there's like a lot of stuff in those. There's a lot of weird racial coding in those movies.
Yeah, that's the thing too.
There's complicated gender politics, and the problem is those are actually in most cases those have been improved from the books. So it's like one of those things where it gets harder to then like recommend going into the lore deeper. And that's just how it is. Like a lot of the most popular stuff, there's they're made by human beings of their era, which have a lot of biases. I'm sure as I get older, Avatar: The Last Airbender's biases will become more obvious. I mean, we are talking about a Western show that is heavily influenced by Eastern culture. We're still predominantly made by Westerners. The majority of the cast is white. Like, those problems are still in this, but it's I don't think it's as bad as other examples.
Yes. No, sorry. I agree. Yeah, especially in regards of it is basically whitewashing because most of the voices are white people, and the characters, a lot of them are also. I hesitate to call them white passing. Because, like, Katara and Sokka are, like, heavily inspired by, like, Inuit culture and stuff like that, right? Like, that's the basis of the water tribes cultures. But then there's also no, like, there's no analog for people with darker skin colors. There's, like, there's no black people in it, really. And that's not, like, it doesn't ruin the show, but it does also kind of raise some questions, which we will definitely get into at some point very soon, because there's a character that pops up that I think is a valid critique, or presents a valid critique of the show.
It gets complicated. I mean, that stuff's always... I think the one positive we can say is that they are white. I would argue they are white passing a lot of the times, but not white passing enough to where the fans didn't immediately freak out when white actors were cast in the roles in the film.
Yeah.
Like think of any other fan base where it's like maybe a character's, like especially in works of literature, maybe a character's race isn't specified. And then suddenly it's like, oh, they cast a black actor to play it, and the fandom freaks the fuck out. You normally see the opposite, out there than what you saw with Last Airbender, the movie, which we will get to, of course.
Yeah, and you know what, like, as much as we're criticizing, also give them credit for that, because that still just is very, very rare, if happens at all, with mainstream media. You know?
Yeah.
That people recognize that, no, white people should not play these parts.
Yeah, I wish we could see more of it. I wish there was more. It was more in the hands of the people who maybe actually relate to the cultures that are being, that a lot of this is based on. Because part of it, it is a thing of it's where it gets complicated, where it's like there's, especially if a show made for Western children, there's an exotic nature to the different cultures of Avatar, but they all are heavily influenced by actual, for real Eastern cultures. And I don't think there's no I think that everyone's always looking for like that line, and the problem with stuff like that is that there really is kind of no line. Like there's clearly bad, but then there's no real good. There's just kind of a gray. And even good stuff like this show are always going to have those little problems with it that you just kind of can't get around. And I think that's just a problem that it is with the fantasy or science fiction genre just in general. Like, that's something that they seem to not be able to divorce themselves from.
Yeah, when you get into, like, the parable stuff and you start drawing... I don't even want to say too much from reality, but I think there is a point where it just becomes, like... You're probably going to hit some stumbling blocks, You're going to trip over yourself a little bit, even with good intentions. And even if the end result and end goal is positive, there's probably something that'll get lost in the shuffle a little bit. And I don't even mean that in, like, a completely negative way. I just mean, like, growing pains are okay, I guess.
I think a big problem with it was, I think a good example is, do you remember the Bionicle series of toys?
I do remember those toys.
Which had like a whole mythology to it. If I remember correctly, a lot of the language and words that were used were based on like Pacific Islander mythology. But they kind of just like took pieces at random and just reworked them into the mythology of Bionicle. I know that was controversial at one point. I know that ended up being a problem after a while, which I think is like the more, like, don't do that version of it. But I don't know, like, I hesitate to call, like, because sometimes I see people being like, hey, this stuff, like, it brings attention to these other cultures. And I'm always, like, a little hesitant to, like, praise something for doing that. Especially because we just live in this fucked up world where, especially if you're an American, just a really fucked up history of how we've treated other nations and their culture. It's like, if you even have like a poor reading of U.S. history, you realize the fucking Enchanted Tiki Room in Disneyland is pretty fucked up. So, and it's like, that's like one of like the minor things. So,
wait, what's Splash Mountain based on?
that's like not even like... what's fucked up is Splash Mountain's based on Song of the South, and it might not even be in the top 10 of problematic things in Disneyland right now.
But
at least they're reworking that one, I guess.
Oh yeah, what is it gonna be? Do you know?
I heard Princess and the Frog.
Oh, okay, that's cool.
Which is excellent, except for the fact that they've I don't know what the fuck's going on at Disney Imagineering, but they haven't been doing a great job lately. As a theme, from my opinion, as a theme park nerd.
Oh, okay.
Where all the rides are just too fucking bright, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, not to get into a whole like mainstream pop culture blockbuster debate as well right now, but like there is a problem with just everything needing to be like bright, sunny, cheery. Nothing can be changed from like what is considered accessible.
I guess
like it's a whole problem with that corporation in particular too. But whatever. Speaking of cultural diversity, I love the weird range of earthbending wrestlers, I guess. There's like a
yeah.
luchador frog man, which like I don't know why. I really like that design. It's so simple. It's so easy. Maybe it reminds me of Spider-Man. That's why. I don't know.
One is clearly what's his name from Punch Out.
Which is the Punch Out one?
There's the one, he looks like King Hippo from Punch Out.
Oh, okay, yeah. That's, I think his name is
called
the Hippo or something.
Yeah. It's just straight up King Hippo. But it's great. Like, this clearly this was an episode where whoever wrote it, or maybe just the whole team, was like, let's just put all our, like, wrestling knowledge in this one episode.
Mm-hmm. And you want to talk about Toph? Because she's your homie.
Toph's the best. I don't know how to get into it without, like, I don't know, just like, I like Toph. I think Toph's the best. It's one of those things where I could see this character. It's always like that fear if like they ever try to adapt this, which is I guess what Netflix is doing. Where it's like if the character's like a few degrees off, it can be really annoying.
Mm-hmm.
And just snarky and just kind of like the jerky character for the sake of it. But there's this interesting levels of her, like, she was raised in an overprotective household because she's blind and she doesn't like it. And she's rebelling against it to the point where she runs off with a bunch of vagabond children. Which, maybe not the smartest idea, but hey, it ends up working out in the end.
Yeah, I mean, when one of those kids is destined to save the world at some point, you could probably come up with worse. Like, honestly, the worst option is probably to just stay in place. Mm-hmm. But I do like, I mean, Toph is the best. I like that her snarkiness, because, snarkiness can get a little obnoxious and everything needs to be snarky now. But hers comes from, like, a genuine place of, like, character. It's almost like it's not even a defense mechanism. It's just how she reacts to the world because she's so fed up with being coddled, Yeah. Like, she's angry and she has every right to be. And I think that's what's so great about how this show writes their female characters. Not always, like we've talked about, and it's obviously not like, I don't want to overwhelmingly praise a bunch of dudes because it was predominantly dudes that worked in the show too, but like, the women are allowed to be angry, and they're not at fault for being angry because there's a lot of shit to be angry about. So I don't know. I just like that a lot, and it doesn't ever feel like they never coddle the characters.
Yeah, there's a logic to it,
Mm-hmm.
And especially when I've seen other examples of this type of character, where it's like they go, "Oh, they had a difficult childhood, and that's why they're snarky."
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, that's not why people end up being snarky. Like, you gotta go a little more than that. And even then, it's like, it's also when someone is just kind of like snarky in like this broad sense,
Mm-hmm.
where there's no logic to it, like what that person finds funny. You know what I'm saying? Where it's like suddenly they go from like, oh, they'll make fun of like someone for wearing a dress or something, but then they'll also make fun of someone in a way that's like deeply hurtful.
Yeah.
It's like there's no like middle ground. Whereas Toph, they get her to stick to this level where she can actually be hurtful, but it's in her character and she's not trying to be when it happens.
Mm-hmm. It's not like Sorkin. Sorkin, I know everyone fucking loves Sorkin.
Oh, it's not like the worst person ever to write women.
Yeah, which he is, by the way. That is just an objective fact. Scientists agree that is a fact of life.
I don't know. Colin Trevorrow's still out there.
Okay. There are definitely other terrible writers of women.
Colin Trevorrow is still at large.
Anyways, the point I want to make is that not only is he awful at writing women, but every character ends up with like the same walk and talk attitude. They're spouting lots of facts really fast, and it's like, whoa, that was an epic takedown, bro. Way to own the libs. And then it's like, they all talk the same. And this show has done a really good job of keeping characters' voices very distinct and their emotional cores very, like, separate, but also why they need each other at this point in their lives.
So many Sorkin women, though, it's like they're fast talking, they're taking their shit, but also deep down they do want to be coddled.
And their dads did something to them when they're younger, and it fucked them up with trusting men or something like that.
Which, like, there's maybe something to say to that about, like, a woman character who's, like, in a certain, especially, like, maybe, I think that's why maybe The West Wing is, like, one of the few good things he did. Sometimes, like, I mean,
yeah.
A lot of The West Wing hasn't aged well, but, like, that's the world of politics is one where you kind of have to, like, block off certain sides of yourself in order to function in it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it makes sense for maybe, like, oh, someone trying to rise through the ranks in politics, a woman, maybe she has to, like, act like a tougher person than maybe she really is. Or she, like, tries to act like she's in control, but really she needs help with a lot of stuff. You could see that,
Yeah.
But the problem is he carried that over to literally, like, any other woman character.
I know. Like, I don't know how anybody watched Molly's Game and was like, Sorkin's the next great director now, too. And just, like, didn't immediately throw themselves into the ocean. I'm sorry, but that is, like, the worst film ever made.
I liked, like, most of Molly's Game all right. Like, I wasn't, like, rapturous about it, but I was enjoying it. And then just Kevin Costner shows up in, like, the last 20 minutes, and it's, like, the worst fucking thing ever. It was, like, so awful. And it was like any goodwill I had for the movie just went away immediately.
Yeah, like I think why this show is also so good is that it understands that being vulnerable isn't a weakness. It's a strength, being true to your emotions is a good thing. Processing and expressing them in a healthy manner is how you grow as a person. And I don't think Sorkin actually understands that on his screenplays. I don't want to make judgments about the man in that case, but I don't have a good read on him is what I'll say.
Yeah, he seems like a weird guy. Yeah. And that will definitely play into the next episode. But before we get into that, I just want to say one thing I also really like about this episode is we're introduced to Toph. At first she's a wrestler. We find out she's actually the daughter of the richest family I think they say richest family in the Earth Kingdom. Am I correct?
I think you are.
And but it turns out she's been keeping her wrestling a secret because her family coddles her because she's blind. Shenanigans happen. There ends up being a conflict where it is revealed that Toph is actually a wrestler and she actually can handle herself. And then she goes to her parents like, "Look, you got to stop coddling me. I want to go on this adventure. I want to do this stuff." And any other show would be like, the parents would be like, "You're right." You know what? This one event that just happened in a less than 30-minute episode has changed our entire worldview on our own child. And instead they're like, "Well, we realize now we've been giving you way too much freedom." And they just double down. And so Toph has to sneak out. And now not only are they on the run from the Fire Nation, but also people being hired by the richest family in the Earth Kingdom.
And this just is a really impressive way of continuously weaving in the class elements of this season. Like,
yes,
they have their own, so that's all they care about, and they welcome the Avatar and his friends into their house after they arrive, right? And they're like, "Oh, like thank you, Mr. Avatar, yada yada. Like, how long do you think it's gonna last?" Total respect. But the moment he even threatens like their little family ecosystem and comfort zone, they're like, "No, get out. Like, that's it. We have ours. That's all we need." And Toph says, "Fuck that," basically, And now
that's always the logical next step of these type of stories is you kind of do have to start looking at like the political element, especially if you really believe in your fantasy setting, or not even fantasy setting. Because I always think about if you watch Sergio Leone films, the Dollars trilogy are kind of just like a straight up series of Western adventures. There's a little bit of like an anti-war thing going on in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. But it's still mostly about three guys trying to find a treasure. And like wealth doesn't really play like a huge role in what's going on. But as soon as you get into Once Upon a Time in the West, suddenly it is about the politics surrounding the construction of a railroad, which is what's driving the whole story.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, that's really what's going on in the West. It wasn't like this mythical place of cowboys and, you know, people finding like their own land. It's literally like land barons and people stealing land and killing entire families just so they can build a fucking railroad. Mm-hmm. And that's like what starts kicking his stories up to another level. Whereas, I mean, and then his next film, Duck You Sucker, is like straight up about a revolution.
And for anyone that hasn't seen Once Upon a Time in the West, take this opportunity to go do that. Because it's fantastic, obviously. And I think this is good that you brought up Westerns, and I think I know why you brought up Westerns. Because if we can move to the next episode, Zuko Alone, this is basically like the ultimate Western episode of the series.
It's Shane.
Yeah.
It's just Shane, but it's Avatar.
It's Shane, but it's Zuko. That's the thing.
Yeah, it's great.
This is my favorite episode of the series, and that's not even like a controversial like hot take thing. Like it does top a lot of the best of Avatar lists. But it's definitely the one I could pull aside to watch like whenever the most. Because if I watch other episodes, I'm just gonna end up watching the whole thing again. Like that's how my brain works.
Oh, yeah. I would definitely like to just rewatch this episode all the time. Really, you really walk away with a good feeling. Oh
no, it is like gut-wrenchingly sad and depressing, but like I don't.
It's a Zuko on a fun little adventure.
No, it is. It really is like one of those postmodern westerns where it's like, oh yeah, this isn't fun and exciting. This is deeply sad, and there are serious problems in the world that haven't been addressed, and now these people are left to fend for themselves, and it's not looking good.
Well, it's that mix of like, it's like, yeah, these people are. There's a lot of stuff that drives the world that's just awful, and things don't always get better. And also the type of characters that we have turned into heroes through westerns, that if you really sit down and think about them, are probably deeply fucked up people, and have probably gone through a lot of shit to end up where they are.
Mm-hmm.
Like no one becomes a cowboy loner by choice.
That's one of the things I want to see. Like I'm done with superhero movies for a while, obviously, like you are, but like something like Logan, you know, is obviously very inspired by Shane. Like they call it out like several times in the actual film.
Wait, are you saying Logan's a western? I like Logan a lot.
I do too. So I'm not even like shit talking it, but there is always the moment in those X-Men films just like, isn't Wolverine just fucking awesome? And like, yeah, there is like an element of how cool that is too, but I think they always need to go the little extra step. You know, I'd like to see westerns make a comeback, and I don't think that'll happen for a little while. But
well, it's hard because no one gives a shit about the West anymore,
mm-hmm.
and we really shouldn't, because it's like, if you really think about it, it's like, oh, how was the West won? Oh, through genocide and land grabbing
mm-hmm.
and violent political wars. Like, there's nothing romantic about the West. Like, that was all bullshit.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like, if they come back, that's something that needs to be focused on more.
I think the Western doesn't need to come back, but I think we need to like look at Westerns a little more. And I'm not even saying, I think a lot of people do. It's just studios don't want to,
mm-hmm.
because so many themes from especially later era Westerns have just seeped into popular culture that now we can explore it in different, more fantastical settings. Like you said, with like Logan being a Western, with this is very Western inspired. Star Wars has definitely been influenced by Westerns. Mm-hmm. I mean, I just think that we need to look at that, because what's missing from so many films today, in my opinion, is the internal struggle of characters. I think that seems to be something that's fallen away. And if there is an internal struggle, it's something very simple and something that's cleanly resolved by the end of 90 minutes to 2.5 hours.
To bring it back to this episode, I think that's why I love revisiting it. Even though it is a deeply sad story, I get a lot of satisfaction out of something that's this well like made. You know, like Manhunter is like a happy place movie for me, but it's also a film that deals with just horrifying things in it, you know? But I love watching it. It makes me feel happy because it's so good. And this is like another situation like that, which is also an episode with a striking color palette like Manhunter.
Yeah, same. And but this is also something where it's like you could have seen them doing like an entire season of just Zuko on his own.
Oh God, yeah.
But you could have done that, but they just did this one episode, and that kind of ended up being the right decision because it just you don't need more after this.
Yeah, it would have been cool, you know, and like everyone loves signing off on spin-offs now because then more profit or whatever. But yeah, this is totally all that it was needed. Uncle and Zuko are only separated for like 2 episodes. And again, it's all you need.
And like I said, in my mind, I remember that separation being a lot longer.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I remembered it being, like, the whole season. And instead it's like... That's the thing where it's like, when I think about what's coming ahead with Ba Sing Se, like, it's just in my mind, I know it's not right, but, like, in my mind it's like, that's 2 whole seasons in Ba Sing Se. And it's like, no, it's like maybe 5 episodes. And it's like it's kind of nuts to me how much they were able to pack into it. And I think part of why maybe I think that way is that I am going back to childhood where it literally was once a week there'd be a new episode. So when I would see one of these, I would have to sit with it for a week before watching the next one.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm glad that at least Disney Plus is doing that with stuff like The Mandalorian. I wish the pacing was better, but that's another problem entirely.
No, I don't need this at all. It all depends on what show you're doing, because I think it works well here, but when we get to Legend of Korra, I think Korra would have worked a lot better had it just, like, the whole season's just dropped all at once, which is kind of what starts happening.
Yeah, and then everyone started turning much more positive on it, you know? And I don't think that was a mistake either.
And I think it's one of those things where, like, if it had been, like, oh, Legend of Korra going straight to Netflix or whatever, I think it would have been received a lot better than had it been, like, 1 episode at a time. Although, the opposite of that is you probably wouldn't have gotten as strong a reaction to the final of Korra as we did.
Mm-hmm.
If it all came out at once. Although, I'm saying that now, and I'm thinking about, they kind of just did something similar on another children's animated show, and I don't want to give the name just because I don't want to spoil it.
Okay.
But that it created a lot of waves when it happened. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe now there's enough eyes on Netflix that if a show's popular enough, it will become, like, that sort of thing will leave the impact that it does.
My expectation is that it will be received much more positively now that people will rewatch it, like, as a whole. On a much faster pace. Again,
without getting too into it, my only fear is that when there's a lot of talk about differences of opinion and whatnot, and, like, anyone can think what they want, that's fine. But what's amazing to me is that when I read certain takes on Korra that are just factually wrong, it's like they're just complete misreadings of the episodes. And that's what always, like that was the same thing with, like, hate The Last Jedi all you want, but there was so much out there about it that was just wrong.
Yeah, like the movie's not showing you one thing, but they're saying it's doing another.
Yeah. It was just like, that's what kind of drove me nuts about a lot of those discourses. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, I think it's just like this weird thing where we've turned into people that, like, at least when it comes to mainstream movies, that we feel the need to spoon feed everyone a lot of this stuff. And that's where I think the element of Westerns that have been left behind. Because, again, I always think about, like, there's that great moment in Fistful of Dollars where Clint Eastwood's character saves that family and just shoots all the bandits. And the woman's like, why are you doing this? And he was like, I'm going to fuck up the line, but he's like, because something like that happened. I saw something like this happen once and no one was around to help. And that's, like, the only backstory we get on the man with no name.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's all you need. And that's kind of what's happening here, although we do get Zuko's backstory.
Yeah, and I remember, like, the first time I watched it, I wasn't into the Zuko backstory, even though Zuko was, like, my boy, right? I was like, no, I want to go back to, like, the Western stuff. That was so cool. But, like, now especially, it's just, like, so deeply sad. And so good, but, like, so sad.
Yeah, in terms of economic storytelling, I like that they're both together, but I could see them being separate episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, again, another thing, like I said, and I think this is something Korra does more, where there's a lot more ambiguity, where it'd be interesting to just see Zuko reacting to things, but not explaining why he's reacting in that way. And that's another thing I feel like is getting lost, where a character will do an action, and you're like, why the fuck did they do that? That's an irrational thing to do. And the movie doesn't explain it, because it's supposed to, in a perfect world, provokes the audience to maybe think about that character deeper. But instead it turns into, like, plot hole cinema sins bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah, and here, I also want to shout out the way the episode plays off the like the gray areas. I know that's like a weird like trigger word now because of like discourse, but like in terms of the Earth Kingdom, we've already seen that this is like the last bastion against the Fire Kingdom, Fire Nation, and in the first episode of this season, we already saw like a crazed general, like who's lost his mind due to the war. And now we're seeing, like, basically lower-level war profiteering with the soldiers, like, guarding the town. But really, they're just kind of running it because it's an easy, like, picking situation.
You know, in a weird way, it reminds me a little bit of the writings of Ambrose Bierce, who was a Western writer back in the day. Who we also don't know when he died because he disappeared.
Oh, okay.
He wrote An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge.
I have not read it.
Oh, well, you don't need to read, but it's a famous Twilight Zone episode.
Oh, okay. No, don't remember that one.
All right. Well, I won't spoil it, but it involves a man being hung off a bridge, and it's a man being hung by Union soldiers because they were occupying the South, and there was a law that anyone that even approaches railroads will be deemed a saboteur. So it's an innocent man who's going to be hung because he was caught near the railroad by Union soldiers.
Ah.
And a lot of Ambrose Bierce's writing was like a lot about like all these stories about heroes of the war and stuff like that. And a lot of stuff was like there were a lot of people in the war too that weren't heroes. And that's a little it gets a little more complicated, of course, because after his era we suddenly get all the revisionist history about the noble South and the lost cause and all that shit. But that's, in my opinion, that's not what his writing's about. But he wrote a lot of stuff like that where it's like, yeah, you know, there were heroes, but there were also people in war who were just fucking scumbags.
Yeah, and they're clearly taking advantage of like these economic downtrodden people. You know?
Yeah. And that's something where it's like the naivete of a lot of these stories, especially with Zuko. Zuko even has that too, where he's so laser focused on restoring his honor and all his shit that he doesn't think about the, you know, political implications of a lot of the things happening around him. And he doesn't think about like what does it mean for a war to actually happen. And this is it. What's weird about this show is that what I both like and also I think makes a reading of it always a little troubling is that the Fire Lord that will be faced at the end is just like straight up evil. There's no like redeeming backstory given to that guy. There's also just like the show makes sure to go like there's a lot of things that cause a war to happen, not just an asshole leader. Yeah,
and to get to Star Wars again, a lot of the bad faith discourse are about the politics of Star Wars, and like they're shoving it down our throats. Like, I don't care that it's there, but it's not subtle, and I want it to make sense in the story. And like the truth is, most of the politics of Star Wars make perfectly fine sense. There are just bad faith readings about people not wanting to read into it, right? And a lot of the discourse leading into Rise of Skywalker in the YouTube area, at least, was always people saying, like, I want to see a huge Lord of the Rings style battle with Star Wars. And you do basically get that in Rise of Skywalker, but then there's no, like, political or ideological motivation between the ships and the battles and the stakes, right? Like, there's none of that progressing in the story naturally. You can like the movie or dislike it or disagree with me, whatever. That's my reading of it. And to me, that's weightless by that point. Whereas, you know, the beauty of The Last Airbender and the tragedy of it is that you see all the inner workings of how these people and places got to be where they are now that we're watching them. And this is kind of like a little nexus point of that, I guess.
Yeah, like, I understand. Although, that's a fucking bad reading of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, I know. That's not the point of Lord of the Rings battles either.
Well, it's also like the climax of Lord of the Rings wasn't the battle.
Mm-hmm.
But it's whatever. People drive me nuts.
I know.
But it's also not a perfect film. But one thing I really like about the movie Skyfall is that it starts out with like a huge action set piece, and as the movie goes on, each action sequence gets smaller and smaller.
Yeah, I really like that structure.
Yeah, where by the end it's just two people facing down in a church, which is what I want to see more in movies. But if you do that, people walk away confused.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, literally, it was like, and even Last Jedi copped to the idea that we should end with a straightforward battle, but it did end with like a gigantic battle,
Yeah.
And it ends on a more quiet duel, and that was enough to fucking drive people nuts.
I know. And that the fact that the battle is really just like, we need to get out of here and survive. It's not like a victorious, like, we did it. It's like, okay, we survived. Now we can figure out how to win the day.
Which is literally the entire plot of Empire Strikes Back.
I know. I know. I'm just so mad all the time.
It's like my mind is just blown. It's like, it's one of those things where, like, I don't want to act like I'm a fucking, like, I'm an idiot, is the point. I'm dumb. I'm just a guy who just watches this stuff. I just can't imagine that so many other people are watching exactly what I'm watching and just not seeing it.
Yeah.
It makes you feel like a crazy person.
Yeah, I understand nothing. Also shout out in this episode to our girl Lauren McMullen, who has like continuously just done like A+ work on this series. And I didn't realize she had directed my favorite episode, Zuko Alone.
It directed by a woman, written by a woman. This episode.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, there you go. One episode's written by a woman.
And it's an episode that's also interesting because, again, we're talking about the show getting into about people's emotions and trying to, like, be true to yourself. And what's so, like, upsetting about the flashbacks and then flash forwards to the present is how much of a different person Zuko is in both stories. Just the giant gulf between the two timelines. And it's really depressing. Because it's like Zuko could have been a completely different person. And now he's not that person. And in a simpler story, it would end with something like, oh, Zuko, you can always be that person. And that's just not true. It's like, now you got to be something else. You have to be a combination of who you were, who you became, and what you're going to be. And it's really upsetting.
It's just so tragic. Like, I mean, there's no really other words for it. It's the saddest thing. And in that superhero fashion as well, it's an idea that they also take from Westerns where, like, they're battling to save a world or a people that they can't really be a part of because of, like, a call of duty or something like that. And here, Zuko does do that, but he doesn't leave because of, like, some greater calling or something like that. He leaves because they reject him,
Yes.
because of his origins, basically.
And he even tries to, like, make some, like consolation by giving the kid the knife, and he won't even take it.
Yeah, and the kid tells him, I hate you. And then he walks away.
Yeah. Which is not how Shane ends.
No, it is not how Shane ends.
That is not how Shane ends. Although both make me cry. Mm-hmm. So there's that.
Yeah.
The ending of this doesn't really make me cry. What does genuinely upset me is Azula telling young Zuko that father's going to kill him.
Oh, yeah, which
might be the most upsetting thing I've watched in a long time.
And she sings it to him. There's a rhythm to it, which is just like straight up psychotic. Like, there is something wrong with that. Her as a child.
We'll get more into Azula in like maybe 2 episodes, but that was not a great moment.
Yeah, we can actually get into it like in a minute because it is the next episode.
Next episode's I want to save it for episode 9.
Okay.
Because I got a point to make.
All right, that's fair.
Yeah. I was saying it's I don't know. It's so sad watching young Zuko.
And she is telling the truth, right?
Yeah,
okay.
I mean,
and that's why. Okay, so there's obviously like a lot of like debate about what Zuko's mom does or why she has to leave. She kills the Fire Lord, right?
Yeah, I think that's implied. And I think that was confirmed in comics later.
Okay.
But even without that, I mean, that's what is heavily being implied here.
Mm-hmm.
Is that was part of what was going on here. And here's the thing, though. I also think it was confirmed that Zuko was going to be killed in the comic, but I don't think that's the reading you can get from this episode. What I think is the reading you can get is that it's entirely plausible that his father would kill him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, which is just as scary as if it was actually going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's a hard episode. Just to end with her being like, "Who's going to help you now, you fuck?"
Mm-hmm. And the truth is,
also,
no one. Zuko's alone. Hence the title of the episode.
Zuko's alone. Although, the other thing which hasn't happened, the truth is he won't be alone because Uncle Iroh's on his way back.
Yay!
Even though he had the throne taken away from him.
Oh. I thought you were talking about the present, but yeah, the past story too.
Well, yeah, in the past, he doesn't show up because Zuko is alone. But Uncle Iroh, you can assume that Uncle Iroh in this time is when he started developing more of a connection with Zuko. And maybe if Zuko didn't recognize it, Iroh became his only confidant in this time. But this also, there's that moment where they get a letter from Iroh about him invading Ba Sing Se. And he's like, "I hope you kids get to see it before we burn it down." Ha ha. Like,
yeah, that's
which is like the other side of Iroh that we haven't seen up to this point, which is the before Iroh, before he loses his son.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's a little like kid logic where it's like, oh, the moment his son dies, he has this awakening.
Mm-hmm.
Although you could argue that that's not really what happened. That his son died, and then just that weakness is what allowed his younger brother to take the throne from him. And that probably just is what resulted in Iroh doing a lot of self-reflecting.
Yeah.
So
that maybe the powers he's serving are not actually, like, a good thing.
Because maybe he was the son where it's like all his leadership and skill came natural to him. Maybe he was like Captain Kirk and never had to face the no-win scenario. And then he loses his son, and then it's like even if he wins, he'll still have lost his son, and that kind of broke him as a person.
Mm-hmm.
Very sad.
Yeah. Incredible little episode here. Like a true work of art. And so the next episode involves Azula and her warrior woman riding super speedy lizard things that can dodge attacks, and Appa's sleepy. And this is straight up Empire Strikes Back, like asteroid sequence level tension.
It's that, but it's also a little bit of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, if to reference another Western.
There we go.
Which is what's the guy's name that's chasing him?
Oh fuck! Hang on, this is gonna kill me.
LaForce?
Hang on. I can't.
LaForce. They're being chased by Indian tracker Lord Baltimore and the relentless lawman Joe LaForce.
Okay, so you had it right. The second one.
Yeah, I thought it was just LaForce, but it's Joe LaForce. And I know LaForce because in the movie Mallrats, the mall cop is named LaForce and has the same hat. But you know what? Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid is one of those things where it's like it's a really fun movie, but when that chase starts happening, it is genuinely like intense.
Yeah.
Because like up until then they're just fun bandits, and now they've met their match.
Yeah, well, it hits you with like a grim reality, basically.
And that's kind of what's going on here.
Mm-hmm.
where it's just like now they're up against someone. First of all, it's kind of like, not to dunk on poor Zuko, but it's kind of like how much of a clown he might have been. Because now, like, you get Azula who's actually trying to catch him and actually taking efforts to catch the Avatar. And it's like Zuko just, like, futzed around for, like, an entire season.
I know, like, look at the time difference. Like, he spends the entire season only bumping into the Avatar occasionally. Azula's like, now I'm going to hunt the Avatar. Let's see, 5 episodes after that decision. That's it. She catches up to the Avatar, and she has a plan. She's got this machine, and she's got, like, the things they're riding. She's got her friends. She put together a whole fucking team. And then it's like, you cut to Zuko, and they just happen to run into pirates. And it's like, they also just happen to be in the area because fucking Uncle Iroh lost his One Piece to his fucking board game. And it's like, that's the only reason they keep like overlapping. Oh, and that one's even better because he's at the end of the episode, he's like, oh, look, it was in my pocket the whole time.
Yeah. And that's also in season 1 is the moment where they're like tracking the Avatar and he's doing like, it's a clear diversionary formation. This Avatar's a tactical genius. And then they cut to Aang and they're like, you're lost, aren't you? And he's like, yep.
Yeah, not the case here.
No.
It's like a master work in like building tension. Like it just never lets up in this episode. Even when like Toph and Iroh meet and they just have like a cup of tea, like there's always this little like thrill building in the background.
Well, because it's also like it's a fun moment, but it's also like, what if the other person discovers who the other person is or who they're working for?
Mm-hmm.
So there's always like an underlying tension. Kind of reminds me of remember in like Game of Thrones season 1, there's that scene where it's like Arya and Tywin.
That's season 2, but yeah.
Season 2?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because this is after what's his name's been executed.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you're right. Season 2, and she's serving under Tywin, and it's like they have like a good conversation, but it's also like, better not find out who they are. Like. Which is also something that I don't believe was in the books.
No, it was one of those moments of the show where it was like, oh wow, this is even more compelling. Like, it's brought all the pieces together.
Yeah, it was that moment where it was like, you know what? Even if they get ahead of the books, if these guys, with the skills they got at writing these scenes, they'll still be able to bring this thing in for a landing. Time has made us all fools.
But here, they stick a hell of a landing for this episode, but we'll get there in a second because I just want to talk a little bit about like the new dynamic of the group. Like usually when the lineup changes for a cast of characters in a TV show or a story or whatever, like you get a moment to settle in with them and then you challenge the status quo. They don't even have that. Like this is like basically immediately after Toph left with them and they're already just not, or her and Katara are already not getting along. And it's making them uncomfortable. And then you have Azula's like squad chasing after them like day and night, basically, to the point where Appa's passing out in the sky.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, which is not a great moment.
No, it's very disheartening.
But it's also one of those things where it's like, I remember starting this again, right? I don't remember these episodes being the same episode. Where, you know what, another show that does that for me? Oddly enough, is Seinfeld. Where you'll sit down and be like, oh, this is the episode where George fakes something. Like you remember one plot, but then it's like, oh yeah, it's also like these 3 other classic storylines. So that's an odd comparison.
Yeah, Avatar: The Last Airbender and Seinfeld are basically the same show.
It's the exact same show.
Yeah.
Both are shows about nothing, which is why we are struggling to talk about it. Remember when you almost talked me into doing a Seinfeld retrospective?
I know. Well, Sokka is basically George Costanza.
You know what? You're not wrong.
Yeah.
No, Sokka's not as pure evil as George Costanza.
No, of course not.
George Costanza faked being handicapped just so he could get a private bathroom. But, yeah, oh god, I was saying something.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, like I said, I don't remember all these stories being the same episode, and it's like any other show where it starts out where it's like, Katara and Toph are like clashing in terms of how they work as people. That would be the whole episode. Mm-hmm. And instead it's like, no, there's also this big chase happening. And which is much better because also it's like, you know, I think it's more reflective of actual struggles where it's like, you know, like sometimes you'll be like in a fight with someone who you also have to work with because you're also dealing with another issue on top of that. I mean, that's more reflective of actual conflicts in life. And it's also not super neatly resolved. It's more like they just kind of resolve it for the sake of resolving it.
Yeah. And those characters do continuously butt heads quite often. And like it makes sense too, given their personalities, you know, like Toph as an earthbender and as like a literal master earthbender, is very grounded in her ways, whereas Katara has been more fluid and like she can adapt better to situations, and Toph is, you know, it's literally like a rock and a hard place.
Yeah.
Which is
and
nice.
It's also I gotta say, I think I know why I identify with Toph, because I definitely have a lot of Toph attitudes. Where it's like, no, don't worry, I took care of all my stuff, I'm good. It's like, yeah, but you know, we gotta do stuff, and I'm like, yeah, good luck with that. I can be that asshole sometimes. I understand it's a character flaw, but sometimes Matt gotta be Matt.
If I'm not mistaken, this is also the first episode where Ty Lee is hinted at having a crush on Sokka, which I just think is really funny, and I'm glad it's not played into too early. But I think it's so funny. Like they're like this war criminal's hunting down for blood, and also like, hey, that guy's kind of cute. Like, because they are just like kids at the end of this still.
Yeah, I think there's something. Well, I think that's what this thing with where again I don't want to play my Azula card just yet. But I think one of the things that's going on is a lot of the show is that they are kids, and a lot of them still treat what they're doing like kid stuff. Azula's only crime is that she woke up to the game before everyone else. I
think she's got more than that as a crime, but
I know. What I'm saying is that she's the one who understands that when they catch these people, they're gonna kill them. You know?
Yeah.
Whereas I think maybe like May and Ty Lee are like, yep, we caught the bad guys. And then it's like, all right, bye now. It's like, you know, like they're even like, oh, it'd be fun to see Zuko again. And it's like, you realize Zuko's going to be executed by his father. If you catch him. And it's like, they clearly don't. But Azula knows, and what's fucked up is that she's cool with it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, they go off, they come up with a plan once they realize that Avatar, Aang, and the gang are being tracked by Appa's shedding. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, they split up, they make a diversion. Sokka and Katara take care of May and Ty Lee with Appa, and then Aang draws out Azula, and there's this amazing bit when Zuko shows up, and Azula's like, Zuzu, and then Aang's like half asleep, like, Zuzu? like what is that? And I don't know why, that always just kills me when he hears that Zuko's pet name is Zuzu. And like they do this funny cut where they're cutting between like Zuko and Azula's death stare, and they cut to Aang and he can like barely stand. It looks like a meme. Like, I'm surprised it's not a meme yet. Maybe I'll make it a meme. And then everyone teams up against Azula at the end. Aang, Sokka, Katara, Toph, Zuko, and Uncle Iroh. Which is amazing.
Yeah, good moment.
Yeah. And then Azula's like, alright, I know when I'm beaten. That's a surprise! And she strikes Iroh with lightning. And I'm not gonna lie, when I first saw this, I thought, oh my god, no. I thought that was it for him for a second. Because the episode does not end on an answer for his status. It ends with Zuko not allowing Katara to help them because he's so angry and doesn't know how to deal with that shit.
Because he's a big old sad boy.
Yeah, he is. He is a big old sad boy. And I thought that was it for Uncle Iroh. It was not, thankfully, because the next episode we just see he was in massive amounts of pain and his whole like upper body is bandaged, which makes sense when you're struck by lightning. But I was very happy to see that was not the case.
Yeah, that would be upsetting if he just died like that.
Yeah. I mean, Azula's a stone cold killer, and she did probably kill like a bunch of the people on her initial ship. But that's a whole other thing. But the next episode, Bitter Work. All of these are fan favorite episodes that we're talking about today, basically, for lots of reasons.
Yeah.
And this one I just saw was ranked like number 1 on a recent list of best Avatar episodes. I don't agree, but it's totally up there. This is a fantastic episode. And it's where Aang finally gets down and dirty to learn about earthbending. And he just can't get it because earth and air are so like dramatically different. He can't ground himself yet. And I like it a lot.
And Toph pulls a whiplash. It's like, not my tempo.
Oh, oh my god, this is Avatar's Whiplash.
And it's kind of is.
Oh, and Zuko learns about redirecting lightning.
Yeah, so it's like Iroh's training Zuko and Toph's training Aang.
Mm-hmm.
And Zuko and Sokka's stuck in a hole.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and this is the episode with Fufu Cuddly Poops, who you did not remember on our first recording.
I did not.
Yeah.
And then it came back to me when I watched the episode.
Yeah.
You know why? That's the type of thing I understand why that left my brain.
Why? That's cute.
I'm not like, you know, because I feel like that's something where I probably heard dozens of people say that over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I don't want this to stay in my brain.
Okay, I guess I could just do that. That's nice.
Well, 'cause, you know, it's funny when it happens the one time, and then it's not when you hear it 3 dozen times. No, this is definitely a great episode. But this is where I want to make my point about Azula, who isn't in this episode.
I know, that's why I was like, what the fuck is he talking about?
What? Because here's something that I don't know if I want to say it stuck in my craw a little bit, but it definitely stuck in. It's something I couldn't ignore when it happened.
Mm-hmm.
So Zuko's taking care of Iroh, and Zuko's like, look, I got to get better because I got to stop Azula. I know you're going to tell me not to because she's my sister. And Iroh's like, no, she's crazy and has to be stopped or whatever.
Yeah.
Which, look, is understandable from a guy who just got shot with lightning from her. I would probably feel the same way about someone who did that to me. But I'm starting to think maybe Azula hasn't been afforded the kind of depth that other characters were afforded on this show. And I'm not saying she needs to be redeemed. It feels like she was kind of just like a bad egg from the start.
I have actually felt a little similar on my rewatch with this, and the fact that this episode does every once in a while you get these great parallel episodes between Aang and Zuko, and I like that this is just a recurring trend now. But they're also afforded these mentors that basically nourish their like life education properly. You know, Aang and Zuko traveling the world, that's just bound to happen. You know, that's more often than not, experiencing the world does open your mind up to possibilities and experiences. And Azula being so confined to the Fire Nation and her father's right-hand child, basically, I think has offered the writers an easy out into just making her an unsympathetic villain. And I think they do fill in the blanks a little bit later on pretty well. But I think it is okay to say you probably could have gone a little deeper with like how Azula got to that mentality. Because literally every other child on this show, because she is also a child, is given more to work with. And again, does not mean she needs to be undergoing some massive redemption arc or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the things that's made me actually want to buy the comic books. Because I from what I understand, they go a little bit more in depth there. And I would just like to see it. Like, you know, I don't know if that redeems the show as in terms of a flaw, because that's, you know, a separate work, which could easily be ignored by people who watch the show, as I have for many years.
Same.
But it was just, to me, it felt like just to write her off as crazy was, you know, I don't know. Especially because we see there's an argument to be made that the flashbacks we see in the Zuko Alone episode are tainted from being entirely from Zuko's perspective. And so maybe he painted himself with a more sympathetic brush and then his sister with a less sympathetic brush, you know? Maybe it's not an entirely reliable story. But we also don't seem to see a whole lot to the contrary as things go on. Here and there, but not a ton. And it got me thinking, like, what was her relationship with her mother? And also there's a scene where Iroh writes that letter and he gives Zuko a knife, which also shows that Iroh probably did not understand his nephew at the time. Because Zuko definitely did not come across as a kid who would want a knife. And then he gave a doll to Azula, and she burns it. And it got me thinking, like, maybe she resented, you know, trying to be confined into that sort of box, you know, as women are often confined. And maybe she looked at her mother, who clearly was not in a good relationship with the father, and maybe she in a way resented her mother for letting that happen to her. You know, there's a lot of talk, especially when there's like an abusive parent. If the father's abusive, a lot of the times the child will resent the mother just as much, if not more, for staying with the father or putting up with him. You know? It's a weird psychological effect that happens. And I just wonder if there was something like that going on with Azula that I would like to see revealed. Again, I don't need her to be like, suddenly she's part of Team Avatar. I'm totally fine with her going down as a villain, because, you know, a lot of awful people in the world have fucked up backstories. Including the sitting president of the United States, who probably has never had a happy day in his life. And on a basic human level, I do empathize with it, but at the same time, I think he should go to prison. So, I don't know. It's weird to maybe throw that out in this episode, which is so much about the elements and how they relate to each other and finding, like, an inner peace. It's where we're given this introspective stuff for other characters, including Zuko, who was a pretty one-dimensional villain in the first season, but it's the same isn't afforded to Azula.
The only perspective we get on her is from other characters. You know, there's one episode where, or maybe two at most, where you do get more of her own perspective, but they're definitely later in the game, and they don't do anything to help understand how she got into that mindset. It's just her mindset now.
One thing that doesn't help either is that whenever she does something incredibly evil and awful, she's always laughing.
Yeah, that's not great. Okay,
which kind of... I mean, look, hey, I'm totally fine with doing that. I just want a little more.
Yeah.
You know, I can totally believe someone could end up like that. I think that she should be given her day in court.
Well,
is all I'm saying.
Speaking of days in court, you know who the writer was for this one?
Oh, yeah, our buddy.
Oh, don't call him that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe that has a little something to do with that Iroh line about, no, she's crazy and she needs to go down.
Yeah. It is weird that the moments where I'm always like, that's a little weird, always seem to pop up in his episodes.
Yeah.
I don't even know if that's a thing. Like, honestly, it could be entirely coincidental. But we should say his ex-wife who wrote the last episode.
Which was, like, remarkable with empathizing with characters.
Yeah. I mean, the second to last episode. Sorry, I totally skipped the chase.
Oh, yeah. But on back to the element side of this episode, too, I do like that between Aang and Zuko, Aang has to learn to balance between earth and air, to head into the next phase of his Avatar education, and Zuko has to understand the balance between the movements of fire and water bending to learn to redirect lightning. And so you're covering like all this huge like variety of bases with the nature of the series. And I don't know, that's really cool. That just struck me this last time I watched it, and I was like, oh wow, this is really clever writing.
Yeah, and it's also a moment of, you get like a view at how he's been raised, where like the Fire Nation's best nation. He's just been told that like his way's superior. And Iroh's more worldly, has been like, hey, I learned all this shit from hanging out with the other guys. And by hanging out, I mean invading their countries. But hey.
I mean, at some point, there is the implication that he was more benevolent in his education with that. But it's not a black and white thing, I think. Although there was maybe a lot of bad things he did in that time, too.
Well, again, like I said, with someone afforded a better arc, Iroh, who is very much probably a war criminal. But it's also like a moment where you get the reading that he probably went out to war, probably didn't have a great relationship with his father, and was like, when I become Fire Lord, I'm going to do a better job. And so he went out and trying to replace his father, and then came back and eventually became a guy who's like, nah, man, fuck the system. Which is the real arc you should go through. Because if you try to be a better version of your father, you're just always going to fail.
Yeah.
That should not be a goal.
Oh my god, Iroh is basically just like Luke Skywalker.
Hey,
kind of similar things, although Luke wasn't a war criminal.
Yeah. Hey, he kind of was. He blew up that Death Star.
Oh shit, that's right.
There was like fucking like janitors.
Okay, Kevin Smith. I know that joke.
I know. I didn't even realize I was referencing Clerks until I was halfway through my point. But what I'm saying is, hey,
and hey, he doesn't blow up. He blows up the first Death Star, and that one is the one filled with the space Nazis. The second one is the one with the contractors.
Yeah, but in an empire the size of the Empire, there was gotta be some guy who's just running the phones.
Death Star Hotline, how can I help you?
It's like, last contract I signed with the government, and then boom, dead.
So stupid.
Hey, I just shit happens. It's a complicated world.
Yeah. Aang fights a moose lion.
Yeah, that's an interesting combination. That feels like they're at this point, they're just like spinning a wheel and then combining two animals.
Well, in the Zuko episode, there's like a pig chicken.
Because not only is it a moose lion, it's like the size of a barn.
Well, because I think it's not just a mountain lion. It looks like a saber-toothed tiger, which is like weird. I mean, I like it because I love saber-toothed tigers. I wish they still existed, honestly, because I want to pet one, but that won't happen.
Yeah, that seems like a smart idea.
If they're like a baby one,
I guess I pet baby tigers.
Yeah.
When there was a zoo near where I grew up, and the tigers had babies. And my dad knew a guy and got me in the room.
Oh,
with
wow.
the baby tigers.
Oh, my God. So you got to live out that scene from Manhunter.
Yeah, it was a little different than that. But I honestly, I was so young. I was like 4, so I barely remember it, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
But hey, still an interesting story.
Yeah.
Very interesting for this podcast.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure everyone at home listening to this is like, yeah.
I think people love it when I go off on tangents about things that only happen to me and only matter to me.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what the show's about. It's about me.
The protagonist of life.
Toph just straight up throws like boulders at Aang.
I know, right? Like, she's very into the tough love thing, and it's like, this is already that like raises questions, but also boulders.
Yeah.
She does not take it easy on Aang. And, Katara's there, like, Aang responds to, like, supportive comments, like, that was good. Positive reinforcement. And then Toph is like, oh, okay.
Boulder.
Yeah. While Sokka is still stuck in a hole. Like, that's all he does this episode. He's just stuck in a hole.
It is great that he is just stuck in a hole. Like, all these, like, deeper stuff about, like, the elements and then the relationship to each other, but also, like, inner character turmoil. And then it's just he's stuck in a hole.
Oh my god, it's so good when Aang finds him and they're like, oh, can't complain. And it's like he's stuck in the hole. And so Aang's just like unloading on his like inner turmoil about it. And Sokka is still stuck in a hole. Like he could be trying to get him out that entire time, but it doesn't even like register with him. And so, like, I don't know. Aang's not really self-centered a lot of the time. And when it does happen, it's always really funny to me. It's not that his problems are, like, invalid. It's just, like, Sokka's stuck in a hole.
I do really like that Aang, like, it makes sense for him as the Avatar where, like, he can master stuff so easily. But then the moment he struggles, he just immediately wants to give up. Because, like, he just can't, like, he's just so down on himself. It's like every child prodigy you've ever known.
Which, in contrast with Zuko, who even says at some point in this episode that the world's never held back on him before, Like, he's struggled through, like, his entire life to find his own voice. And, he doesn't get it in this episode still. And all he can do is just kind of yell at God in the sky. And because Iroh won't shoot lightning at him to learn to redirect it, he was just showing him the movement. So Zuko was like,
"Yeah, he's like, what are you? I'm not gonna fucking shoot lightning at you, you dumb."
Yeah,
shit.
he's like, "What are you crazy? Like, I'm gonna kill you."
It was a great moment. But it's also that thing where it's like Zuko, he still lacks that deeper thing he needs to get to because he only is getting the surface of what's happening.
Yeah,
it's like, no, man, I try to teach you something about yourself. And it's like, nope.
Yeah, so that all the Zuko shit in season 2 is just like tragic. He's so like unsure and angry, and he doesn't even know who to lash out at properly. Or not that you can lash out properly, but you know what I mean. Like he's just a mess. And then
Zuko, I'm sure you'll do the right thing in the end.
And so we move on to the next episode, the desert.
No, the library.
The library. Oops. Never mind, the library. You're right.
Which is on the edge of the desert.
Well, it's kind of in the desert. It's not like
we're somewhere around Barstool at the edge of the desert when the drugs began to take hold.
Anyways. Well, we'll get back to that.
Fear and loathing in the owl library place.
Oh yeah, there's a giant owl spirit, and I love owls, but I used to be petrified of them, and I think I've told the story of why before. An owl lunged at me through the trees at my grandma's house, and it is so terrifying how big they can get. Yeah. So this episode brought back some images, but I like it.
They look like goofy fucks until they lash out.
Yeah, their claws are very large.
I was always scared of the great owl from fucking The Secret of Nim.
I've never seen The Secret of Nim.
Oh, you should check that movie out. It's pretty good.
Okay, I'll check it out.
It's a weird one. Because it's like, as a kid, I forgot it was about hyper-intelligent rats.
Oh, what? I didn't know that. I thought it was like some weird like folklore thing.
The plot of that movie is about that there were these rats that were experimented on, and now they're super intelligent and they can build cities.
Oh, wow.
But the real plot is about a mom trying to get medicine for her sick boy.
I can't really wrap my brain around that right now. But
I know.
Wow. Huh.
I rewatched it like a year ago, and I was like, oh yeah, that's what this movie's about.
But the library is not about rats that can build cities. It is about discovering what happened on the darkest day in Fire Nation history. And what Sokka eventually discovers in the library beneath the sand in the city run by, Wan
Shi Tong?
Wan Shi Tong, he who knows 1,000 things.
Pronouncing it wrong.
Is that...
Big owl guy.
Yeah, is that an eclipse happened.
I could have sworn he was voiced by Jeffrey Combs, but it's actually Hector Elizondo.
Okay, who does Hector Combs?
It sounds...
I mean, not I know who he is, but like Reanimator, but like, is he in the show? I feel like he is.
Oh, I hope he is. I totally don't remember.
Okay, I'm gonna have to look it up after
I will
this.
now look it up.
Okay, you'll look it up now.
You talk, and I'll look
Jeffrey
it up.
Combs. I couldn't say. Why did I say Hector
Yeah.
Combs? What the fuck? Anyway,
Well, because I said Hector Elizondo.
there you go. Yes, Sokka finds out that an eclipse happened in the Fire Nation, and that caused all the Firebenders to lose their bending. So it was literally the darkest day in Fire Nation history. And they also meet this like wacky librarian dude, or university professor, excuse me, from the University of Ba Sing Se, and he joins them on their little desert quest, and it's a lot of fun. And then it gets really scary, and then it gets very serious, very serious.
It's a great episode. I'm not sure if there's a lot I can say about it, other than I like it, and it gets a little deeper into like the nature of man.
Mm-hmm.
But I sadly have to report that Jeffrey Combs has never been on either Avatar series.
Fuck! I don't know why that made me so mad.
Shame. I gotta say though, he sounds like Jeffrey Combs.
He's totally doing the reanimator voice.
Yeah, it's what the voice sounds like.
You know, like he could tell Sokka, like, who's gonna believe a talking head? Get a job in a sideshow. You know, like.
Exactly.
Like, it's all right there. Also, everyone watch Reanimator, which is fantastic.
And Washington does take heads. He's got them on the wall.
Oh, shit, that's right. For kids.
Or the knowledge spirit, if you fuck with him, he's going to bury you alive and rip your head off.
Yeah, that's, like, terrifying. He's like, no, humans don't deserve the knowledge anymore, so I'm going to bury it in the sand.
That is a very, like Tower of Babel type story.
And it's just nestled in the middle of the second season.
Yeah, and also doesn't come back up, I think, until, like, Legend of Korra.
Yeah, I wanted to keep that one a secret, but that's okay. That's okay.
That's fine.
Yeah. Some stuff comes back in the sequel series. Surprise.
Believe it or not.
Yeah. And Toph stays outside of the library, though, because she's blind and can't see, so she's...
Oh, yeah, that's also pretty funny.
Yeah. And so she stays outside with Appa.
It's funny until it's not.
Yeah, and then they run across some sandbenders when they meet up with the university professor who helps them look for the library. And those sandbenders eventually track them down and kidnap Appa. And it's very sad because seeing Appa in trouble is never fun. And it's very stressful and upsetting. And Aang is naturally heartbroken. And it's not a good time for anyone.
I just did one of those things where, like, sometimes in a story, it's like you have to remove an element from the story to, like sometimes you accidentally put an element in that could, like, break the whole story. Mm-hmm. So you have to get rid of it, like, at some point or immediately after introducing it. And I was, like, thinking, like, that happened in another series, and I can't remember which one, and I remembered, and it was fucking Dobby in Dobby the Elf.
Dobby.
In Dobby. Who gives a shit? He's dead. But he shows up in Deathly Hallows, and then he's like, I can teleport anywhere. And then he dies, because you have to kill him, because if you just had him around, it would solve half the problems they have to deal with for the rest of the life. So then he gets the most horrifying and gruesome death ever.
It's so... Oh my god, I can't believe they ended the movie like that, too. The audience was, like, in tears.
Yeah, but they fucked it up in the movie.
I thought it was executed well, but whatever.
That movie's balls.
No, part one's really good. But anyways, yeah.
No, they cut the best part of the book, but
I don't even remember. I won't revisit for a while for reasons. But
I don't think I will ever revisit. That's one I've got everything I can get out of Harry Potter. It's like I reread the books. Thankfully, like last year, I decided I'll reread the books. And it was one of those things where it was like, yeah, you know, there's some fucked up shit in it, but whatever. And now it's like, oh, I never need to reread those again.
But Aang's reaction to where's Appa, you know, like the way Toph can't even react, and the way the camera like moves around him. I'm saying camera like it's a fucking live action show, but like the way they frame it is really like. It hits me in the gut every time. Like it's so deeply sad because those characters have such like a bond, you know. Like avatars have their animal guide.
Well, he's the only one from his previous life.
Yeah. No, this episode doesn't have a lot going on, like as much as the last couple ones, like ideologically or like thematically or anything like that.
Well, but I mean, it's got the stuff about like humans only use knowledge to get the better of one another, which isn't wrong.
Yeah, it's not wrong, but it's also like, in this one very specific circumstance, they do need it to basically survive. You know? But it is also not wrong. And so it's just a little like, it's that really tragic irony that, like, we do have to lie to you, but we need it to, like, save everyone. And he's like, maybe people aren't worth saving or whatever. Like, there's a lot going on there with that character. That character, the spirit world stuff is, like, really fucking freaky sometimes in this show.
Yeah. Or maybe you could also, like, play your hand a little better and be like, oh, we want to look up the worst day that ever happened to the Fire Nation so we can make sure it doesn't happen again. Wink, wink.
I guess
don't wink at him, though.
Yeah, don't.
Because that'll give it away.
Oh, I'm using my left eye?
Yeah, but, I mean, that was Sokka's fault because he's a dumb.
Yes, Sokka's kind of an idiot. Like, he's a smart tactician. He's just an idiot. And they love him.
Should have kept him in the hole.
So sad.
He should have stayed with Toph. Books would have done him about as well.
Aww.
Although he's the one who puts it together. I am being a little hard on him.
Yeah, he figures it out. Sokka's got a lot going on.
Yeah. I'm just having my fun.
And I like that when they all have to present the spirit with, like, knowledge or, like, a gift so they can, like, explore the library. Like, everyone has, like, these remarkable, like, things to show him. Like, oh, wow, yeah, I'll appreciate that. Oh, that's so cool. And then Sokka's, like, just presents a knot he just made. And the spirit's like, you're not very bright, are you? Like,
yeah.
Oh, poor Sokka. I love Sokka. But no, I think this is the best run of episodes we've talked about so far. And I love them very much. And next time, we'll be talking about the desert, the Serpent's Pass, the drill, City of Walls and Secrets, and the Tales of Ba Sing Se. Which is kind of like 5 episodes.
We're going to end on the Tales of Ba Sing Se.
Yeah, which is also like 5 episodes in and of itself. So... And not like in the way that there's multiple plots going on. Like, literally, for those that haven't seen the show before, it is literally like an anthology episode. Bunch of little short stories, and we'll see how that goes.
Although I gotta say one thing. I just found out that this episode and the next episode both aired on the same day. Because I guess they thought it would be too devastating of an ending.
Oh, that makes sense.
To just leave kids with. Oh, it looks like for the rest of the season they doubled up. Oh no, they stopped. Whatever.
No,
they doubled up a few times.
They double up with this, and then they double up with the return because there was like a wait. I remember there was a wait because I was so eager to watch what happened next. And they're going to find Appa right away. He can't be gone that long. That's what the next episode will be about, and we'll talk about what happens with that and how that devastated young Chico.
I mentioned. How this kind of plays better in like the serial format, whereas Korra might have played better released all at once. Mm-hmm. And when you look at like the dates of these episodes, it's like this weird window into like how television used to be done, where they would like do only a few episodes at a time, and then there'd be like these huge gaps, and then they would just replay all the other episodes. Because like you basically have to like increase the chances of people catching up, because there's just no internet to like watch it on. It's just weird. Like now, it's just like they don't do that anymore. It's like a new Steven Universe drops, and like someone's illegally put it on YouTube by the next day.
Much like these recordings.
Hey, has this been our longest episode?
Probably. I'll cut it down by a little bit because there's some stuff in the beginning that I was just like, why are we talking about this?
Well, I'm about to make it a little longer.
No, Matt, where can the people find you?
Because
I'm gonna cut
last week I kept losing power and internet.
I'm going to edit you out from the last episode and put your ending in this episode.
No, just leave it. It's funny.
Okay.
But
is it?
No one cares. We're not going to get angry letters about how long these fucking things are.
You'd be surprised.
But listen, then they shouldn't fucking listen. Get the fuck out. But now it's time for everyone's favorite segment.
You did it once.
Especially Diego's, where I take a BuzzFeed quiz based on Avatar: The Last Airbender. And today's quiz is, which Avatar: The Last Airbender nation do you belong in? Sound like a good one?
No.
I'm gonna need your help with this a little bit.
That's okay.
I don't know what any of the questions are. All right, let's go. All right, first one. Which element? Oh, what the fuck? It's like which element represents your personality? Water, air, earth, and fire. Gee, which nation am I gonna end up in? I don't know, Diego. Which one do you thinks fits me?
Fire.
Really?
Yeah.
Why'd you say that?
I don't know. I just got a feeling.
Because I got a strong sense. I got a strong will, personality, and drive and ambition.
Yeah, something like that.
All right, I'll go with fire. What two words appeal to you the most? Persistence and enduring, peace and freedom, community and love, desire and will. Man, I don't think any of these really fit me.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I'm going to say persistent and enduring, because that's what I just do when I have a bit I want to do.
I guess.
And you
yeah.
really don't want to do it.
Something like that, yeah.
Which Hogwarts house? Oh, Christ.
Oh, so this is from like 2011.
Nope, it's from 2020.
Oh, what the fuck?
Hufflepuff. All right. How would your friends describe you? Strong, kind, ambitious, passionate. Well, I'm all of those things. I'm going to say kind. That sounds like me, right? I'm a kind guy. If you and your friends are going to do... If you and your friends are going for the same job, what would you do? Go into my interview and do my best, wishing them luck as well? I would ensure that they mess up and I get the job. Screw friends. Back down and let them have it. They need it more. I would do my best and hope they mess up. You know what? I would hope my friends mess up. Well, there you go. I wouldn't force it, but which Stranger Thing teen are you? You know what? This says something because I don't know any of these characters.
I don't know either. But
Jonathan, Steve, Robin, Nancy. Who are those people?
Who are these people? I don't know. I don't know those people actually.
I like the name Robin, so I'm picking that.
Yeah, okay.
Which Hunger Games character are you? This has nothing to do with Avatar. Finnick. I don't know who that is, but I'm going with Finnick. Pick a... Wait, what the... This is the worst quiz. Pick a Fine Line song? What the hell is Fine Line? Is that a band?
I don't know. I don't know any of these. I know some of them, but I don't care.
The song is Cherry, To Be So Lonely, She, and Canyon Moon.
Do Canyon Moon.
I like the moon.
Yeah.
Pick a season. Summer, autumn, winter, and spring. Autumn. I got the Air Nomads.
Okay. Matt, where can the people
Even
find you?
though I'm most identified with fire, I got the Air Nomads.
Maybe it's the momentum of the air.
Air is the element of freedom. The Air Nomads detach themselves from worldly concerns.
Yeah,
found
yeah.
Peace and freedom. Yep, that definitely sounds like me. I should pin it to my Twitter profile.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll retweet it, I guess.
Hey.
Matt, where can the people find you?
I got Air Nomads. I just posted it. I don't know why I find that so funny. No one shared a BuzzFeed quiz in like a decade.
This is the worst.
This is the best.
The opening and the ending of this episode are the worst things that have ever happened to me.
I love this segment. I can't wait to do it again.
You're not doing it again.
I'm doing it. Hey, I got one more for book 3.
Oh my god.
I'm an Emperor OTN1 at twitter.com.
You can find me at the Diego Crespo, twitter.com. Check out the Waffle Press on YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, iTunes, and Patreon, where you can get early access to other episodes in book 1, 2, 3, or I guess we'll be on book 3 by this point, like of recording. So you guys will have access to those, and Yeah, that's it. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We have been professionally unprofessional.